The old Edgebrook Asylum stood at the edge of the small town of Havenbrook, an imposing stone structure wrapped in a veil of tragic history. It had been abandoned for years after reports of unethical experiments on patients surfaced in the early 1960s. A group of us, Kayla, Steve, Marcus, and me, decided one night to explore its infamous halls. The townspeople always warned us about going there. They said the walls still whispered with the voices of the damned, and some claimed to hear the screams of patients who never escaped its cruelty. But we were young, foolish, and craved something to shake up the monotony of small-town life. We broke in after midnight. The front door was chained shut, so Marcus, the boldest of us, led us around the back to a window that had long since been smashed open. The moment we stepped inside, the air changed. It was cold, not just the chill of an autumn night, but a cold that seeped into your bones, making every breath feel labored. The inside was worse than I'd imagined. Peeling wallpaper hung in damp strips, revealing rotten wood underneath. A thick, musty odor of mold and decay clung to everything. The silence inside was oppressive, only broken by the occasional drip of water from some unseen leak. We wandered the halls, flashlights bouncing off the rusted bed frames and shattered windows, joking nervously to keep the fear at bay. But as we ventured deeper into the asylum, the atmosphere became heavier, more sinister. At first, we shrugged it off as our nerves playing tricks on us. But then, the noises began. It started faintly, a shuffling sound in the distance, like footsteps dragging across the floor. We froze, listening intently. Kayla's voice wavered. "Do you guys hear that?" We nodded. The sound grew louder, closer. It was coming from one of the rooms ahead. Marcus, never one to back down, stepped forward. "It's probably just an animal," he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. We followed him into the room, a dilapidated operating theater. The sight that greeted us was enough to stop us in our tracks. The floor was covered in dried, dark stains, too old to be blood, but unsettling nonetheless. Medical tools lay scattered across the floor, rusty and covered in grime, and then we saw it. A lone figure standing in the corner, facing away from us. We froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to rationalize what we were seeing. Maybe it was a mannequin, a prank someone had set up. But then it moved. The figure turned slowly, revealing a gaunt, hollow face with sunken eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. It stared at us, its mouth twisting into a grotesque smile. A low, guttural sound rumbled from its throat. Kayla screamed, and we bolted. Steve was in the lead, but as we reached the end of the hall, we realized Marcus wasn't with us. We turned to see him standing frozen in place, staring at something behind us. Before I could call out to him, the figure appeared again, closer this time, its twisted smile still fixed on its face. "Run!" Marcus screamed, finally breaking free of his paralysis. We didn't need to be told twice. We tore through the halls, adrenaline pushing us forward as the sounds of footsteps chased us, echoing louder and louder. When we finally burst out of the asylum and into the cold night air, the sound stopped. We didn't look back. For days, Marcus didn't speak. When he finally did, all he could say was that he had felt something brush against him, something cold and alive. None of us ever went back to Edgebrook Asylum. The second story, the house on Vickerson Hill. There's a house in every town that kids dare each other to go into, the one with boarded-up windows, overgrown lawns, and rumors of its haunted past. For us, that house was the old mansion on Vickerson Hill. Built in the late 1800s, it had been abandoned for nearly 50 years. After the last owner, old Mr. Vickerson, mysteriously vanished one night. People said the house was cursed, that those who ventured inside were never the same again. Still, curiosity got the better of me and my friends. Jenny, our unofficial leader, was always the first to suggest these things. "What's the worst that could happen?" she had said with a grin. So we went, flashlights in hand, ready to debunk the town's superstitions. The house loomed large as we approached, its once grand exterior now a decaying shell. The front door was surprisingly easy to open, creaking on its rusted hinges as we stepped inside. The air was thick, as though the house hadn't breathed in years. We split up. Jenny and I took the upstairs, while Kevin and Sarah explored the ground floor. The upstairs was worse than I expected. The floors creaked with every step, and the walls were covered in strange marks, almost like scratchings. Each room we entered seemed colder than the last, and there was a persistent feeling that we were being watched. We reached the end of the hallway and found a room that still had furniture, an old bed, its mattress sagging, and a dresser with a cracked mirror. As I looked into the mirror, something moved behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. My heart raced as I turned back to Jenny, who was staring at something on the wall. "What is that?" she asked, pointing to a small door I hadn't noticed before, about 3 feet tall, set into the wall like a passageway for children. "I don't know, but I'm not going in there," I said, backing away. Jenny, ever the fearless one, knelt down and opened it. It was a small crawl space, pitch black inside. "There's something in there," she whispered, peering into the darkness. Suddenly a gust of freezing air blew out of the crawl space, and we heard it. A faint, childlike giggle. Jenny slammed the door shut, her face pale. "Let's go," she whispered, her bravado gone. As we hurried back down the stairs, we found Kevin and Sarah waiting by the front door, looking as rattled as we felt. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "There was something in the basement, something crawling." We didn't stick around to find out. As we left the house, I glanced back one last time. From one of the upstairs windows, I swear I saw a face staring down at us, a small, pale face with hollow eyes. None of us ever spoke about what happened in the house on Vickerson Hill again, but sometimes late at night, I still hear that giggle in the back of my mind. Third story, the tunnel beneath the city. The last place we explored was different. It wasn't an abandoned building or a haunted house, but a tunnel, a forgotten piece of infrastructure beneath the city. It was said that the tunnel connected to an old underground railroad system, but no one had used it in decades. It was supposed to be a quick exploration, just a walk through a dark, musty tunnel. But the deeper we went, the more wrong everything felt. The air grew thick with a foul smell, and the walls seemed to close in around us. Then we heard it, the sound of something scraping against the walls, coming from the darkness ahead. We shined our flashlights but saw nothing. Still, the noise persisted, growing louder, closer. Suddenly, our lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the tunnel was plunged into complete darkness. When the lights came back, Steve, who had been walking at the front, was gone. We called his name, but there was no response, just the sound of that awful scraping, now echoing all around us. We turned and ran, stumbling through the darkness, the walls seeming to shift and twist as if the tunnel itself was alive, trying to trap us. When we finally reached the surface, we collapsed, gasping for air. We never found Steve. He vanished that night, and no one could explain how or why. The city sealed off the tunnel soon after, citing structural instability. But we knew the truth. We had disturbed something in that tunnel, something old and hungry, and it had taken Steve as its price.